welcome back to Journal. Now, you mentioned sales to most people and a red flag goes up. Most of us tend to think of the smooth talking, slick salesperson, always selling us what we don't want and almost always against our wills. Ray Slesinski is a senior trainer with Digital Equipment Corporation, and he's president of his own training consulting firm. He may be about to change our opinion of salespeople. He's written a book called Skyrocket Your Sales, in which he says that the art of listening and not fast talking is the key to improved sales and just about every other aspect of life. Welcome, Ray, to Journal.
Thank you, Khalil.
You know, you make the point in the book, Ray, and I'm somewhat quoting here, that poor listening has been partly responsible for causing divorces, losing profits, ruining careers, and even starting wars. So if poor listening does that, my natural question has to be, what on earth is poor listening, and what is its opposite, good listening?
Okay. Well, I think poor listening obviously entails a lot of elements. One is the inability to concentrate on what the person is actually saying. And the second thing is not using what we call certain behavioral traits in good listening. For example, good eye contact, nodding, open body gestures, paraphrasing and giving feedback to the speaker. So those are some of the techniques that we typically recommend in improving your listening skills.
You know, we have the image of Willie Loman, you know, Arthur Miller's play, Death of a Salesman, as the quintessential American salesperson. He's the old-time sales guy.
Absolutely.
In your book, you posit the idea of the old-time salesman versus the new breed of professional salesperson.
Absolutely.
How do you compare and contrast these two?
Well, there's a wide difference between the old-time selling and a new-time selling. For example, take a look at still some of the automobile salespeople that are...
The used car sales?
Used car, that's a very good stereotype. When you first walk in a showroom, what do they typically do? Well, they qualify you right away, which is good, but take a look at the manner in which they do it. They typically say to yourself, they say to you, if I can show you a car that you like and give you a price that's attractive to you, will you go ahead and make a decision today? Then they launch into a sales presentation. Before they even identify your needs, your problems and goals, and perhaps even find out your name and shake your hand, they're going into a sales pitch. Well, what they're really doing is trying to sell you, and people really want to buy, but they don't want to be sold a bill of goods, if you will.
Aren't they supposed to sell you?
They are. They are. There's nothing wrong with persuasion. I think there's a huge difference between persuasion and manipulation. And I think the old-time selling really uses a lot of manipulation. It's kind of the push, the shove, the intimidate, heavy control techniques. Listening, on the other hand, has a lot of very, very strong active control and persuasive techniques built in. But a lot of people don't realize that. It's a very active skill as opposed to a passive skill.
Could you give me an example for what is active listening? I mean, I listen to you and I assume I'm listening, but I may not be listening. How do I know if I'm listening?
Okay, well, one way to find out, obviously, is to paraphrase and feedback exactly what you think you've heard from the speaker, to clarify, to make sure you've gotten the information. For example, let's use the car salesman analogy. You're looking for a new car, and let's say you're having a discussion with the salesperson for about 5 minutes.
About price and style? And
yes.
Right.
And at the end of 5 minutes, the salesperson comes back and says, Khalil, as I understand it, what you're looking for is a four-door sedan. You're looking for a car between $12,000 and $14,000. You need a car that's preferably blue, or a second choice might be black. You want the following options, and if you're interested, you'll purchase within a week. And all of a sudden, the salesperson is feeding back what you told him or her, and they're showing you by the feedback or the summarizing that they have indeed listened to you. They've identified your needs.
So when I hear that message coming back at me, I know he's understood.
Yes.
And I'm in a position to correct or modify.
That's correct.
Now, you also talk about, and the figure was astonishing to me, you said an astonishing 93% of a message is actually communicated without words.
Yes.
How?
Well, it really has to do with the type of message. For example, in our business, in Digital Equipment Corporation, if you're giving a technical presentation, that's not true. Most of the message is communicated by words. But if you're talking about a message that's heavily laden with emotions, then body language typically will say a lot. For example, the old typical stereotype of a person saying, I'm not angry. Okay, the tone of voice clearly will tell you whether in fact they're angry. It's like, I'm not angry.
I dare you to prove otherwise.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, how about other body language? Because you would devote a chapter to, or more than one chapter, to effective use of nonverbal signals.
Yes.
What are the kinds of nonverbal signals that one could use effectively?
Okay, in terms of improving your listening abilities?
Yeah, listening ability and communicating ability, or sales, if you want to use the term.
Well, I think some of the things that hopefully we're demonstrating properly during this interview, the use of gestures has been shown to tend to relax people. It's very conversational. An open body position, for example, like we're having over here, as opposed to a closed body position, okay? Smiling, as we're doing now, of course, nodding, and interjecting statements, what we call reflective phrases, such as saying, I see, I understand, please continue.
One thing is very important to me. You allow us how in your book that these techniques, when understood and absorbed, help raise profits, but also help you in your personal life, domestic life, interpersonal relationships.
Absolutely.
How does that work?
Well, tremendously. First of all, there is probably no more powerful interpersonal skill than listening to help develop rapport with people. And that means improving the personal relationship between you and your wife, between you and your husband, your children, or friends, or what have you. Why? Well, because first of all, the very act of listening is what we call silent flattery. It's very, very complimentary. And also the very act of listening is such a soothing, therapeutic activity that it's almost a magnetic way to draw people to us, I guess.
Please listen to me, is what people are often saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it also says, I care. I'm concerned. I'm interested in you. It's really a sign of respect, and it's a great sign of love.
Good for you. One or two last questions. If you were to identify the two most helpful, most useful techniques that the average person could employ in improving his or her listening skills, what would they be? Because you list about 14 in your very...
Yes, I do.
Your book is very remarkable, and I saw the 14 of them, and I said, gee, what two of these would Ray identify as being absolutely necessary?
That's a very good question. I would probably say one of the first ones is to use what we call empathic listening. And basically, empathy involves trying to feel with a person. If we truly try to think and feel like somebody else, then maybe we can kind of walk in their shoes for a bit and try to understand what's going through their mind. The other thing is to really attempt, and this is very, very difficult, it's a tremendous obstacle, is to attempt to listen with an open mind.
That's hard.
Very.
Because we're always thinking of our next answer, I think, don't you?
Yes, but there are also a lot of built-in biases also. There's bias against the subject being discussed. There may be a bias against the individual who you're speaking to. There may be emotional problems that are present. So if you recognize that there are some major obstacles involved, perhaps you can understand what's happening and minimize them. So I would kind of think listening with an open mind and trying to show empathy, trying to really think and feel like the other individual and understand where the individual is coming from.
Well, when you train people, what's the single most important message you leave with the people you're trying to train? Go out and do it, or think first, feel first, then do it? I'm not sure.
Well, I guess it really has to do with something you said before, and one of the messages I tell people is don't think like a salesperson. Try to think and feel like your prospect. Do you want to be sold a bill of goods? Treat your prospects with respect and courtesy, and try to sell to them and treat them with the same amount of respect that you would expect in a sales situation.
A point that you don't raise in your book, but I'd like to raise it here, is the question of ethics in sales. Do you think a salesperson should sell a prospect anything regardless of whether or not that particular service or product is valid?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
So there are ethics involved in selling.
There sure are. Digital is extremely keen on being ethical in a sales community. So we try to make sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we closely match a solution with the needs and goals and problems of the people. We'd rather lose a sale, because in selling, I think the key thing is to establish a mutual trust, a good ongoing long-term relationship. You may get a quick sale, but eventually you're going to destroy the long-term relationship that you've established.
It's so refreshing to hear that point of view, because most people say, go after the sale, get the close, no matter what, you know, make it happen.
Well, you're right, it's tempting, especially if you're under sales quota, but it doesn't pay off in the long run, clearly.
So you've been able to repeat with customers and clients. In a sense, you put yourself in the position of them, and you position yourself as a consultant to them rather than a salesperson to them.
Exactly. And even going one step further, not just a consultant or an advisor or a counselor, but a full partner. In digital, we like to think of ourselves as business partners to work with the prospect every step of the way.
Thanks, Ray. We'll be back in a moment with a few closing thoughts, so stay with us.
If you want action, take action. Order Nessun today.
The medical evidence is now overwhelming that pregnant women who smoke too much, drink too much, or abuse drugs endanger the health and the lives of their babies. A friend of mine who recently quit her job as a doctor in an inner-city hospital because she just couldn't stand every day coming in and seeing these young kids having babies with cigarettes dangling out of their lips, alcohol in their breath, and drug marks on their arms, said to me, "Can't we pass a law? Can't we make it a crime for pregnant women to do these things, which are not only self-destructive but baby-destructive?" I said, wait a minute, you can't pass laws to do everything. Public education is needed. We don't want people monitoring pregnancies. On the other hand, we have to do something to prevent this destruction of kids.
Commentaries are personal viewpoints and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of WSBK TV. Whether you agree or disagree, write to us. We want to know what you think.
Ray Slesinski's book, Skyrocket Your Sales. Ray, we have about a minute to go. How would you sum up the whole book?
Well, I would probably say that listening is important, body language is important, and asking questions are critical in the sales environment. But I'd summarize it by saying three things. First of all, listening is vastly underestimated, underappreciated, neglected, and misunderstood.
Underutilized.
Absolutely, beyond a shadow of doubt, especially in the sales profession. Number two, it is absolutely a critical skill to use to develop into a sales professional. And number three, everybody can and should improve their listening skills. So that's probably the essence of it.
Can I pop you one last question?
Yes.
Would you recommend sales to young people today as a profession?
Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Absolutely.
Sounds good to me. Okay, thanks for joining us today. I'm Khalil Sakakini, sitting in for Meg Lavinia. She returns tomorrow. Hope you'll join her for that. Until then, have a great Thursday.